And we're back after a couple of weeks off. We're back, episode 358 of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. This is your host Michael. Joining me this week, per usual, Gail from Communities Digital News, nyfights.com, Daniel from Ford Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, we have got it all. Did you miss something? We got it for you. We got it covered.
Pretty much, lots and lots of fights to break down after taking a couple of weeks off. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and blog/site discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. Uh, for those who want to check out all information regarding the show, for those who want to check out all information regarding the show, the site is the place to go to. p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us with questions, thoughts, suggestions, you can do so. p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find where to follow us on the socials, Facebook/Meta, IG, Twitter, YouTube. Still got the Tumblr page technically, also where you can check out the podcast on all platforms, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Anchor, be it Google Podcasts, anywhere and everywhere else in between. Also links to where you can donate, Cash Me, PayPal donation, links there. Let donation be the best nation. If you have any change to spare, I know it's tax season. If you want to shoot some coin to Pound for Pound Box Report, by all means. I don't care if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever you can spare can help the overall production of the show on camera as well as behind the scenes. Even though I'm not a Beachbody coach right now, I still suggest you check out Beachbody on Demand. You want to get your body right for the summer. If you're looking for Beachbody on Demand, all programs for whatever fitness goals you have in store. If you want to check out the boxing-based program, 10 rounds, I strongly advise you to do so there, or any other programs on Beachbody on Demand, which is whether it's the 645, 6 weeks of the work, the old school Asylum P90X series, the Morning Meltdown, the Bar Blend for those who like the hit cardio stuff, Lift 4 for those who like weightlifting. Please check out Beachbody on Demand and take advantage of the 2-week trial. And that is, for 2 weeks, you get free access to all programs on Beachbody on Demand. Let's get things going. Like I said, a lot of fights to talk about. Want to start backwards from what you may see in the docket if you're checking us out live on YouTube page. Let's get to the main fight that took place this weekend in Japan. The return of Gennady Golovkin, fighting Ryota Murata, unification bout at 160 pounds. And I go to you, Gail, ladies first as always. And interesting fight this was. Took place early, 8 o'clock in the morning. I covered it for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out threekingsboxing.com, your source for pure unadulterated boxing information. The homie 2K, the head of Three Kings, head of media relations, Bo, senior writers, Bakari, yours truly, Jarrell, aka Big Cool, editor Red. Again, check out threekingsboxing.com. Anyway, I covered that card for Three Kings Boxing. This fight specifically, Gail, Golovkin, he got off to a bit of a slow start, and through the first 4 or 5 rounds, Murata, he really took the fight to Triple G. Went to the body. It seemed like Triple G didn't like the body shots, but in round 5, he picked it up, right? He was like, said, okay, enough is enough. A big right hand in round 6 knocked the mouthpiece out of Murata. And it seemed at that point, Gail, the fight changed. Murata didn't attack with the same force as he was doing in the first 5 rounds. And ultimately, the power and the precision of Golovkin took over. He was able to go effectively to the body. He was able to hurt Murata. You can see the accumulation of punishment. Hurt him in round 8, finished him off in round 9, I believe it was, and got the stoppage win. The questions are afterwards. Well, first of all, your assessment of the fight. The questions are afterwards. Is this the same Triple G that we've seen in prior years, 1 and 2? given the fact that he's in line for a trilogy with Canelo, provided that Canelo defeats Bivol in May, how do you think he would fare? My personal opinion, based off of this fight, it doesn't change my perception. I've always felt that Canelo would beat him in a trilogy. I feel even stronger about that right now.
And I'm going to retrieve a squeaky dog toy so that we don't have to hear. Those of us on the West Coast got to wake up at, in my case, I made sure I was ready to go at 4:30 a.m. But you know what? You guys have to stay up so late, so many times on the East Coast to see a main event, and it's freaking midnight or 1 a.m. So you know what? I was willing to take it with good humor. Golovkin has always been a slow starter. That is nothing new. The question that we still really don't know the answer to is, was the first 3 rounds of, sort of getting up to speed, age or ring rust? I think it might have been a little of both. I do think there was some ring rust. Golovkin has had 1 fight in 911 days. Yes, 911. 1 fight in all that time. That's a long ass time to be out of the ring, especially for a guy that in his prime years was fighting 3 or 4 fights a year. So that's a big change. It really has been. So that start was not unexpected to me, but it allowed Murata to get himself into the fight early. I did give rounds 2 and 3 to Murata, by far his best rounds of the fight. But then the old Golovkin emerged. He started backing up Murata. Murata spent way too much time on the ropes during this fight. I don't know whether it was paralysis by analysis, deer in the headlights, not quite sure. And I have seen Murata fight. I saw him get beat by Rob Brandt in Las Vegas. So I've seen him in action, not necessarily at his best. But then Golovkin turned up the heat, started delivering the punching power. And interesting, once again, it was a lot of headshots versus the body work he's done in the past. So he was really, you could tell he wanted that sort of trademark twisted over shot to the top of the temple that has been so successful for him in many fights. But it took him a while to accumulate enough punishment for Murata's team to finally say, no Moss, we're done. I thought Golovkin, considering the fact that he had turned 40, that he's been so inactive, all of the issues that have gone on, pandemic, we don't know whether what's going on, with Russia is affecting him whatsoever over there. I thought all things considered, he did what he needed to do. At times he had flashes of the old Golovkin. And I had predicted a TKO 9, and that's what we got. And that is how Golovkin has delivered fights and wins the last, say, the back 5 years of his career. Looking ahead, obviously now this tees up the greater potential, the greater actual, can see it in the distance reality of a fight with Canelo. But you're right. Canelo has to win his fight against Dimitri Bivol. That is not going to be a walk in the park for Canelo Alvarez. Not at all. I submit that will be by far the toughest fight he's had in a long time. Depending on what happens and depending on how Canelo looks, if we see trademark Canelo, Golovkin was good on Saturday, but as I said on social media, several places, you cannot merely be good and beat Canelo Alvarez. You have got to be great. I'm not sure Golovkin is great. It's a fight I don't particularly need to see, but I think we're going to see it.
Looks like we're going to see it as well. not going to give Count Bivol out. I think he has more than enough skill, talent, ability to pull off what some would consider, what a lot of people consider an upset. Should this trilogy happen, Triple G, he cannot get off to that kind of slow start. Not against Alvarez. Too good, and he's not going to let, he wouldn't let Triple G back into it, right? He has to get off to a slow start, and he has to fight at a faster pace, in my opinion, to beat the likes of Canelo. Even then, it would be trouble. He would be have to be at his absolute best to win against this version of Alvarez. And at 40 years old, moving up in weight to do so, I don't know. I'll go to you, Jacob. Jacob is joining us from Jab Hook on the undercard here. Slept on fight between Junto Nakatani. We've talked about him before on the show. He's a WBO flyweight champion, second defense of that belt against a countryman by the name of Yamuchi. And I have to say, I was really impressed when in Nakatani's last fight, fourth round stoppage of former 108-pound champion Angel Acosta. I'm just as impressed in this fight, Jacob. He took control, Nakatani. He took charge of Yamauchi early and often, hurt him really in the first round, dominated, had his way throughout, stopped him in the eighth, had his face all kinds of busted up and bruised and battered. During the fight, they talked about Nakatani being his possibly his last fight at 112 pounds. They mentioned him possibly fighting Ioka, the WBO champion, or Chocolatito Gonzalez at 115 pounds in the aftermath of this win. Charlie Edwards, I mean, not Charlie Edwards, excuse me, Sonny Edwards, who's the IBF champion at 112 pounds, was doing a lot of chirping on Twitter saying he would love to face Nakatani. Here's the question. If you were Team Nakatani, Jacob, you can give your commentary on the fight as well. Would you consider staying at 112 pounds to fight a Sonny Edwards just to kind of clean things up in the division, or would you shoot straight for the top fighters at 115? For me, no disrespect to Edwards, but the money is at 115. The big opportunities is at 115. I would love for him to go up there. I think he can compete very well with the likes of Ioka, with the likes of Roman, Estrada, Bam Rodriguez as well. He fits right now. He fits right in that 115-pound landscape. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to echo what you were saying. I mean, for boxers, basically, these nowadays is they have to go where one. It depends on what they're in boxing for, right? Is it legacy, or is it money, or is it a combination of both, right? If you're not going to be able to make certain fights at the weight that you're at, and possibly if you're struggling to make that weight, you can outgrow the division. We all know that there's certain boxers out there that try to make a lower weight to try to like, kind of be the bigger guy, bully, so to speak, in that division. But if the bigger names and the bigger, legacy fights are up, a weight class and, the money, then that kind of makes sense also. So it really just depends on that. It was an impressive performance, and I do agree with you that he can compete with people at 115. My only question with him is I don't feel like his chin has really been tested yet. So I have, not concerns, but, I would like to see him, kind of tested, see some adversity, and to see how he deals with that. Because we all know when boxers have, natural ability and have, certain, physical advantages, part of it is the mental aspect, right? And part of it is what kind of game plan do they have when they face adversity, and you know, can they dig deep? Do they have a second gear? You know, can they adjust? So these are the kinds of things that I would like to see going forward. You know, I'm not gonna say that, you know, he couldn't compete with the people at 115, but I still would favor someone like Gonzalez over him, because as much as he dominated Yamaguchi, it still took him a little while. I mean, Yamaguchi was tough, but it still took him a little while to, you know, kind of get him out of there. You know, I think it was the 8th round, right? So, yeah, good fighter. You know, good to see. You know, he get some exposure.
Absolutely. That's the really the important thing here is your last point about the exposure. Some folks saw the win against Acosta. This fight was on an even bigger platform, given not just DAZN carried it, I believe Amazon Prime and other outlets carried it both here in the States and the world. So more of the boxing public got to witness him uh, uh, and got to see what kind of talent that he is. I think that he's clearly the best. Well, I ain't gonna say clearly, but I think he's the best at 115. Would love to see him move up. I think he's clearly the best at 112. Excuse me. I think he can compete at 115. The bottom line for me, I think he's a real talent, and he's going to be some kind of problems for anyone in that 112, 115 weight range. I'll go to you, Daniel, to talk about some more fights here. Like I said, we're going to split things up here because there's so many fights. It's not going to be necessarily in order. And what I sit in the docket. Let's move to the Showtime card, Daniel. And I didn't see this fight live, but I read all kinds of comments on Twitter. Uh, WBC interim 154-pound title, Sebastian Fundora against Erickson Lubin. And from what I've read and from the video I've seen of it, I've seen most of the fight, not all of it. My apologies for it. This was something else. I summed this up by what Bud Crawford said about Fundora on Twitter. He said he's a cheat code, and he's absolutely right. Never have I seen this kind of fighter, uh, Daniel. A guy so tall in that division, what he brings to the ring. What is he? 6'6", something to that effect. Reach
Mm-hmm.
of a condor. He comes forward, and you just can't get away from him. And he's all over you like a swarm of bees. And that's what happened here against Lubin. He put him down in the second. Give credit to Lubin, who stayed in there and fought hard. Put Fundora down in round 7, but Fundora recovered and just basically just overwhelmed him. I was just amazed at the punishment that Lubin took. He was originally stopped, I believe, in round 9. Cunningham said no more, but
Mm-hmm.
Fundora, just an anomaly in terms of what kind of fighter he is. Uh, it's going to be tough for anyone to beat him at 154 pounds, given how he fights and given his unique physical attributes.
Yeah, he's not I wouldn't call him particularly unique. Like, there's two other fighters that I can think of that, at least proportionally wise, in their divisions, have that same effect, but they don't fight the way Fundora. At least one of them doesn't fight the way Fundora does. The other one does. Leo Santa Cruz at bantamweight, and now Ray Vargas at featherweight, 130 pounds. Same type of fights, tall for their division, lanky for their division, but Santa Cruz is a person that once his motor starts, it does not stop. I mean, and in his prime, it was a machine. Vargas, he's more of a boxer in that area. Fundora is this fight showed that he is a person that, yeah, he's not going to use a lot of his physical advantages as far as for height and reach, but it is tough for you to land on him and then get good, clean headshots on him, which is unfortunately was the problem for Lubin because he chose rather than try to maintain a little bit of distance and get a little bit more success than what he did in the seventh round. That's I think that's when he knocked down Fundora. He decided to go into an inside fight. And unfortunately, that not only shortens Fundora's punches, it shortens his too.
Right.
And the thing, unfortunately, with Fundora is that that's still in his wheelhouse. Yeah, he can maintain distance, pop the jab, keep you at bay. But like I said, like Leo Santa Cruz, he's not going to use that in man. He's going to go inside. And because he has the longer limbs, he may have more leverage to actually land good, clean punches on the inside the way Fundora did. And it was uppercut city for a good amount of that fight when it came to Fundora. That's how he got the knockdown on Lubin. Good, clean, flush uppercut. And those punches were landing throughout the fight. Even when Lubin was having some bit of success, he had to do it off wild punches. It wasn't from a crisp combination. It was from wild punches that ultimately caught Fundora. And Fundora himself admitted in the post-fight interview that he took a knee to recover. And ultimately said, Lubin's corner, Cunningham, stopped the fight. He's been in this situation before, Cunningham, where he's seen a fighter that unfortunately he may not surrender, but you have to surrender for him. He did it with Lamont Peterson before he retired. And now he's doing it with Lubin, and you kind of feel bad for Lubin in a way. Like this is like the second time he got an opportunity to get close to the title. The first time, obviously, he got floored by Mel in the first round. And then now in a situation where a fight that, as close as it was, he was winning on all three cards. I think he was up on all three cards by 2 points. And the fight that he was winning even with him winning on the cards, he just took way too much punishment. And I think, unfortunately, that's going to be his ceiling at 154. And it's not a situation where he can move up to 160 because then you're facing harder punches in that division. Still. So it's a bad situation when it comes to Lubin. This may be his ceiling, which I do feel bad for. But with Fundora, like it does show that he can use his advantages really well. Will it be enough against Mel or Castano? Or actually, remember the next challenger up for those two, Tszyu. Tim maybe, because Tim's a little bit green himself. Mel, we haven't seen him fight somebody like that before. Castano might actually be more willing to go on the inside. So it can't possibly work against champions, but we have to see how it goes. But it's clearly now that he's in the contender stage. And if a situation happens where Tszyu can't land the fight of the winner for Mel Castano too, I would not mind him being the one to get the next piece after that.
He's a player certainly. At 154. Look, as I don't know if he will beat Mel. I know people are throwing a lot of criticism at Mel's way following that draw with Castano, but styles make fights. Mel is more consistent than Lubin. I think he has a better chin than Lubin, and I also think he has a better jab than Lubin when he decides to use it. Castano, that would be World War III, him and Fundora. I would love to see that fight. Let's just hope that Fundora, by rule, he's supposed to get the winner. I just want to see face the winner of the upcoming fight between Mel and Castano that's going to take place, I believe, in May. I'll go to you, Gail. Want to go from that fight to the return of Ryan Garcia in Texas. Made his comeback against Emmanuel Tagoe. And a lot of the fight went 12 rounds. Garcia had his way throughout. I thought he was going to take him out early with the distance. A lot of criticism towards Ryan Garcia's way in the aftermath. Do you think that it was fair? And what do you think about his comments afterwards in terms of what he said about calling out fighters? And he said that's just a thing of the past, that's not the wave anymore.
Once again, similar to the fight between Golovkin and Murata, you have somebody who was out of the ring for a long time, particularly as active as Garcia had been leading up to the pandemic. And he's got a new trainer in Joe Goosen. They're just getting to know each other. I think given those circumstances, and given an opponent who after a few rounds decided, where's my bike? Where's my bicycle? Got on it and rode. And that presented a different sort of challenge for Garcia. He's never really needed to chase a difficult opponent around the ring and try to cut him off. So got a little chance to practice his ring generalship skills, and he's going to need to keep working on those. I'm not troubled by the outing. It's not the first time that Garcia has gone the distance. I believe it's the first time he's gone 12 rounds going the distance. And after being out of the ring so long, that's not going to hurt him. Not one bit. Now, the crowd at times booed the fight, booed the lack of action, which, tough guys and tough audiences in Texas. What can I say? And they're used to seeing the pre-pandemic, pre-layoff Garcia. He's still a kid. Give him time. In Joe Goosen, in Denim, I trust. I give Goosen some time with the kid. I think it's a good matchup. Now, as for Garcia saying, I'm going to stop calling people out, I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. If that's how he wants to position it and say, listen, you put the fights together, I'll fight the guys. There were a lot of fighters who've said that for many years. They don't target anyone in particular. They let the matchmaker in the front office take care of it, and they focus on their business in the gym. I am perfectly fine with Ryan Garcia doing that. I'm glad he's back. He got the chance to get working and shake off whatever rust, and for him, whatever jitters he might have had. Golovkin is enough of a veteran that even with the layoff, he isn't going to go into the ring with any nerves. Garcia is a different story. So he handled it. He got in. He got out. He needs to get back in as soon as he physically can. It would be very smart for him to try to get in a fight this summer. That's what I'd like to see.
Quick follow-up question. The one thing I really observed while watching it was the size. Ryan looks a full weight class bigger than Tagoe. The fight, he weighed 138. How long do you think he can stay at 100? I know he wants titles at lightweight. Tank, Haney, who we may talk about later on. How long do you think he can stay at 130 at lightweight? Because he looks like he's a 140-pounder right now.
He's made no secret of the fact he's going to be moving up. But all of these guys they're all sort of within the same age range. They're all getting to the point where, man's strength is growing in and they're starting to not be kids anymore. And they're all going to move up, but they're all going to move up together. So I'm not troubled by it at all. This was fought at a catch weight, by the way, by the agreement of all parties, partially because Ryan has been out of the ring for so long and partially because he is having trouble making weight in a way he didn't when he was 21 and 22 years old. And hey, that is not a problem on his part. He's simply outgrowing the division. But Tank is right there. Haney is right there. It's not going to be a problem. They're going to eventually, I'm sure, all fight each other. At what division is the question? And I think it's going to be at a higher division than we all imagined because they've simply not gotten in the ring together yet.
On the undercard, Daniel, you had a flyweight, women's flyweight unification bout. WBC champion Esparza fought WBA champion Fujioka. Really competitive fight. At times, it was a bit sloppy. Esparza got the win by unanimous decision. My problem is the disparity of the scorecards. 100 to 90 on two scorecards, 97-93 on the third. Where was the respect here for Fujioka? To me, that says that no matter what Fujioka would have done, she had no chance. It was the skids were greased for Esparza from jump. I don't like that.
Yeah, it takes away from the fact that in the later rounds that turned to be a really, really decent fight. Fujioka kept coming forward, kept landing a good amount of counter punches to Marlen, but Marlen also caught her with some good lefts and rights and rocked her for a little bit. I think a little round. I think it was the eighth round where she kind of rocked her a bit. So the scorecards of it's always a situation where the scorecards don't tell the difference of the fight. And this was a much tougher fight for Marlen than I think a lot of people probably expected. Because of obviously of Fujioka's age. And mainly because of what is probably expected next for Marlen. And that's probably in the form of the person that was commentating on this fight. Super bad Denise Estrada.
She don't want it.
And
she don't want it.
and then that's the thing. And that's the thing about it. Marlen, once again, she got tired a bit in the latter half of the fight, but it wasn't to the point where it was draining. She did her certain conditioning is a little bit better. But the fact that Fujioka was able to land a lot of those counters so flush and was able, I think, and caught her in the ninth round a little bit pretty much. But then they went full rock and sock him in the 10th. Even with all that happening right now, we don't have a situation right now where you can see that Marlen has any chance right now of upsetting Sinicia in a rematch.
I know that's the talk, Daniel, but if Marlen really wanted that, she would have mentioned her. She would have mentioned Sinicia in the post fight. She didn't. She talked about another unification bout at 112. I don't think she really wants it. I just don't.
Well, that's the situation where remember it's going to be dependent upon the promoter. It's going to be dependent upon Golden Boy because they've been building this up. They've been building this up on the ground a little bit. That's the fight that's going to come on their end. It's not into the scale of Serrano Taylor as far as globally, but it is at least regionally the West Coast version of it. Because even though they mentioned it, Marlen's from Houston, she's mainly based in the West Coast. So that's going to be an interesting sell down the line. They're not going to do it right away, obviously. They're probably going to make it to a point where it's going to be undisputed versus undisputed, which probably would be. It's going to be a smart play. But Marlen still has a good amount of work to do, particularly on defense, but she is countering better. She is landing her rights more flushly. And one thing that I like to see when it came to Fujioka, she did faint a little bit and cause, and it showed in one moment, I forgot what round it was, where Fujioka slipped. She's starting to get better a little bit when it comes to feints. And when it comes to a fighter, Fujioka, who likes to come forward, who may not have the balance to keep up and not catch herself when she's running forward, it might be good. Then one way, pivot out, and then try to land a good flush shot. Try to see if you can get a quick knockdown, or when they're slipping, land a punch so they could be counted as a lockdown. There's some good work for Marlen, but like I said, it doesn't give me confidence against Superbad.
I don't have confidence in her having a chance in that rematch either. I just think Sinisa Estrada is one of the best fighters in the world in terms of women, pound for pound. I think she's fantastic, one of the most unique fighters, men or women, that you will see in the entire sport. We've talked about her here before. We've all talked about her privately. I really like her a lot. Not just the way she fights in the ring, but how she carries herself outside of the ring. I'll go to you, Jacob. I want your comments on this fight, Gail, too, when you get back, and go from one women's fight to another, and that is Esparza Fujioka as well as Ryan Garcia to go to place in Texas. I want to go out to California here. Mikaela Mayer, who is unified WBO IBF champion at 130 pounds. She fought a former featherweight champion, Jennifer Hahn, Mayer defending her belts against Hahn. And Mayer kind of felt her out for a couple of rounds, but once she keyed in on her, it was all Mayer. She did what she was supposed to do in this one, Jacob. When you're faced against an inferior opponent, you don't just win, you win impressively and dominated. She bloodied Hahn up, basically beat her up for most of the fight. And won by comfortable decision. I'm intrigued by the comments of Mayer afterwards. For years, she has talked about wanting to become undisputed champion at 130 pounds. And over the past year or so, her and Alicia Baumgartner, who is WBC champion at 130, Baumgartner is going to fight on April 16th. They've been going back and forth each other heavily on social media. But during the post fight with Hahn, Mayer said that if she can't get those fights, she's more than willing to go up to 135 pounds and fight the winner of Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, who's going to fight April 30th, excuse me, at Madison Square Garden. Your thoughts on this kind of opening up her options here for Mayer? Do you think is the best move for her is to stay at 130 pounds and try to seek a fight with a Baumgartner or Hoi Min Choi, who's WBA champion, or is the prospect of going for the winner of Taylor and Serrano, big opportunity, big money? Is that just too tempting, and should she try to go up and shoot for that?
I mean, I think she has both options, right? It's basically what opens up to her. I think she's one of the few fighters out there that has basically said, what her intentions are and is actually trying to make them happen. She didn't want to fight this fight. No disrespect. But she wanted to have a unification fight. So I know she has been chasing before Baumgartner. Who was it? The one that Baumgartner beat. She was chasing Harper before, but Baumgartner won, and so now she wants her. And I think Baumgartner is fighting Matisse. I believe. So and then either Choi too. So she just wants to unify. I mean, she wants the big fights. I think she's shown that she's a great fighter. I think she's a great fighter. I think she has a great corner and a great coach, and I think they've brought her along in the right way, and she's I was super impressed with her last fight, and thought it was easily a contender for a fight of the year. I mean, she showed a lot of grit in that fight. It was a tough fight, but she showed that she has a decent chin and she can, get through adversity and bring it back. And bring it to her. And I think if she wants to, if neither one of the fighters want to fight her or they can't make that fight, I think she has a damn good chance of beating. I mean, for sure, beating Taylor. I have her beating Taylor. I think pretty comfortably. Um, but the Serrano fight, because I think Serrano's going to beat Taylor. I think a Serrano Mayer fight would be great, and that doesn't mean that she can't come back down. It's not uncommon for people to go up in a division, fight for some belts, and then they can always come back down and make another big fight, especially in the women's division, because like Gail has brought up many times before. I mean, it's not like there's a plethora of women, there, or I guess names, I should say. There are tons of women boxers, but it's not as deep of a pool as it is the men's. But it is getting deeper and more exciting, but it's still quite a bit behind, I think, as far as the options. So, for an amount of time that they're in the sport, I mean, they got to kind of make hay while the sun is shining. So, you go where the money is, go where the big fights are. Again, back to your original question is, it just depends whether you want legacy or you want money or a little bit of both.
I'll go to you, Gail, are you back, Gail?
I am back.
Okay. I want to stick with this fight with Mayer for a second. Baumgartner's going to fight Matisse, and it looks like should she win, she's going to fight Choi. Is Mayer's thoughts of moving up to 135 pounds because in her mind, she feels that she's being kind of frozen out of what she wants, which is undisputed? Or is it just a matter of, okay, she sees that big pot with the winner of Taylor and Serrano? Or is it just a combination of both?
I was covering the fight for nyfights.com, right up front ringside watching the fight. Very entertaining. Mayer has occasionally been criticized for being a little too surgical, but she and Han got it on. Now, unfortunately, Han was thankfully much better prepared for this fight than she was in her fight against Katie Taylor, which she took on short notice after having had a second child well into her 30s. So no shame in losing to Taylor. And Han put up a decent amount of resistance, but Mayer bloodied her nose early in the fight. I want to say around 3 or 4. To Han's credit, she kept on trucking, and her corner did a great job keeping things under control. But it had to have been broken the way it was bleeding, and she held up as best she could. But finally, in consultation with the corner and the referee Thomas Taylor, who was really keeping an eye on things, they finally called the fight off. Here's Mayer's problem. Jacob is absolutely right. We have talked about this. There is such a lack of quality opposition at the very top end of women's professional boxing. It's getting better, and we see a lot of young talent rising, but it's not there yet. So Mayer, I don't think, is being particularly calculating. She is simply naming the few options she's got close to her weight class, and just saying, listen, if I can't get the unification fights I need, I'm open to going after the winner of this super fight coming up. I don't see anything particularly surprising about it, I guess, because of the situation the women are in. And the clock ticks. They can't wait around for more talent to rise or more opportunities down the road if their one opportunity is lost to them. So I didn't think anything. I didn't think a whole lot was wrong with what she said. It really fitting. I thought, well, good for you. Doesn't mean it's going to happen either. It just simply said, listen, I'm open to these possibilities against all the top talent that's sort of within my arm's length.
Like I said, we're going to do a lot of recaps, and we're almost done before we get to the news and previewing fights here. Let's go from that second women's fight in California. Let's go all the way overseas to England. I go to you, Daniel, and talk about this fight that took place nearly 2 weeks ago now. Rematch between Kiko Martinez, Josh Warrington. Martinez making the first defense of the IBF featherweight strap, facing Warrington, and decent fight overall. But Warrington, he was just a better man. Ended up stopping Martinez in 7. Your reaction, your thoughts on the fight, and is there an issue here with Warrington's jaw? It was damaged against Mauricio Lara. Even though Warrington had his way in this one, you find out now that he suffered a broken jaw in this fight. Yes, he got the win, and there are opportunities out there for him against maybe Lee Wood, maybe coming to the United States and fighting Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz finally comes back down to featherweight. I don't know why they continue to label him WBA champion, whatever. But is there signs of just that Warrington, despite the win, Daniel, that he maybe damaged goods?
That's been the case, unfortunately, since the first Lara fight, where he just got beat up by Mauricio Lara.
Mollywopped.
Yeah, that was ugly. And say what you want about the second fight, because it didn't really happen that much. But in this fight, we all knew where we were gonna get. Like, yeah, Kiko Martinez pulled off a good upset against Kid Galahad, but I myself have never been too high in Kid Galahad, so I wasn't really surprised that Warrington would have a better showing than Galahad did against Kiko, and busting him up too. Like, he was bleeding pretty badly, I think, from the second round on, and they just it was just a matter of beating him down. The situation is with the broken jaw. You mentioned some of the opponent, Lee Wood. That's an interesting fight. That's a good domestic fight that they can make, and probably would be the safest fight for him to make. Because we have to remember, like, Lee Wood pulled off a hell of an upset against Michael Conlon, but it wasn't like he beat Michael Conlon up. He caught him really good in the last round, so that would be a good fight to make. Santa Cruz, I agree with you. Santa Cruz just has to decide to actually step back down to featherweight, so then we can start considering him for that again. But in all honesty, the only opponent I want to see Warrington with is Mauricio Lara, because of how that second fight ended.
Just like I don't think Esparza wants Estrada. I don't think Warrington or Eddie Hearn. They don't want to put him in there.
Yeah.
In spite of how leaky Lara looked in his last bout.
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you guys like this. At least when it comes to Senicia and Marlen, Oscar wants to smoke. Eddie does not want to smoke when it comes to Warrington and Lara. He kind of probably was praying that Lara would get upset in San Diego, but he didn't. So, but that's the only reasonable fight to make for it, because unfortunately, those accusations, because it happened again in this fight too, the accusations of headbutting to try to get out of a fight, they're gonna dog Warrington on it. In this case, until he has that fight with Lara, and you might want to do it now, because we have to remember Lara. He had a much tougher fight than he did when that homecoming in San Diego. So it might be a good time to catch him before he fully recovers because that's the only fight that I want to see Warrington with right now, honestly.
Good luck with that, Daniel, because I don't think you will see it anytime soon, if ever. Let's go, Gail, to a fight that took place on the same weekend as the Martinez and Warrington. That's the return of Miguel Berchelt. Many fans remember last time we had saw him. He got stretched by Oscar Valdez, losing the WBC belt at 130 pounds. He moved up to 135 pounds to fight a South African fighter by the name of Nakathila. Last time many fans saw Nakathila, he lost. He was on the losing end of a decision to Shakur Stevenson. And yeah, Berchelt didn't look good in this one. Nakathila got off to a strong start. Um, Target practice for him for much of this fight. Um, Stopped him, I believe, in the sixth round. His corner stepped in and said enough was enough. Simple question here, Gail. Is Berchelt done? Is he a spent force? From the looks of what we saw against Nakathila, he should seriously consider calling it a day because yeah, this was bad, all bad from beginning to end.
I don't think Gail's on.
Yeah, Gail left, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Take that question. You can take that, Daniel.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Now, unfortunately, that was really, really bad, and it was a concern when when he moved up to lightweight because at 130 he was pretty going to get rocked by Valdez, and he had literally no legs in this fight. Like I agree with Jacob in the chat. He literally looked like Bambi. The way he kept getting hit, and the way the fight just went for him, it it could be it could be a best time for him to hang up the gloves. It's he had a good run, unfortunately, a few years ago, and he was a dangerous opponent. But at a certain point, that does catch up with you. Like we're seeing it with him. We're seeing it with Luis Neri, who were good punchers and they were boogeymen in their division for a bit, but eventually time catches up with them. And as much as I would like for Chuck to probably go out with a win, it does not look like it's going to happen in this case, unless it's one of these like really really local fights that not even that you have to have a 10 box sale link to find. But yeah, he needs to get out of it. There's been unfortunately too many. There's been enough Mexican fighters who have stayed longer than they needed to and have suffered either brain damage or, like obviously famously in the case of Israel Vasquez and Margarito, permanent eye damage. If you stay in there too long, something bad's going to happen to you. And Berchelt should avoid that fate.
The last fight we're going to talk about here, Jacob, and that was the U.S. debut of Tszyu. A lot of buzz surrounding him in his native Australia. Number top contender at 154 pounds, particularly with the WBO. Fought Terrell Gausha, got knocked down in the first round, but he dusted himself off and pretty much had his way throughout here. Um, in the private chat in our discussions about Fundora, you mentioned that you still have questions about Fundora. Do you have similar questions here about Tszyu, given what you saw in the fight against Gaucher? And how would you compare the two at 154 pounds?
Yeah, I mean, Zoo is still, I think, a work in progress, very much so. I don't think he can compete with the top brass right now. I still see a lot of holes in his game, and I don't know if it was some first U.S. fight jitters or whatever, or part of it might be the legacy of his father, and I guess what's expected of these fighters that come from this lineage. But I wasn't like too impressed with Tszyu. I mean, I'm glad to see that he got knocked down on the first, got caught with a good shot, and he was able to get up and then basically kind of turn the fight around and basically dominate. But I felt like he didn't really like do the things that he needed to get that guy out of there, and I just feel like it's just too early for him. I think what happens a lot of the times is that we try to push fighters, especially if they come from famous blood. They try to push them along too quickly, and the expectations, of course, are high. It's like, well, you're the son, so you should be championship level or whatnot, but that's not always the case. These are entirely different people growing up in a different time, different training, different everything. So I mean, I know he really wants to distance himself a little bit as his own man, which I think he's doing a decent job of. But I would probably put more stock into Fundora, as much as I'm not that impressed with Fundora, but I think he has a better shot, mostly because of his physical attributes than Tszyu does. But that doesn't mean that Tszyu can't work on some of his deficiencies, mainly his defense. I think cutting off the ring and being able to be more precise with his punching. If he can fix a few of these things, he can maybe. I don't think he's going to be a champion, but he can maybe be a contender.
So you would give him a chance against either Castano or Charlo?
I wouldn't give him a chance, no.
Let's move on here to some news here. Didn't put this in the chat, but I'm going to mention it here right now. I go to you on this one, Daniel. Last week, I mean, look, there's been a lot of talk about the situation with Kambosos, who he's going to fight next. There was a deal in place for him to fight Lomachenko. Lomachenko has decided to stay with his comrades over in Ukraine as they're dealing with the ongoing pushing back against the invasion, the Putin-led invasion, ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Thoughts and prayers to him for his safety. Devin Haney has stepped up to the plate, said he was willing to take the fight. They came to a deal last week. There was a press conference, virtual press conference. Kambosos over in Australia, Haney from another location. I believe he was in the States. The fight is going to happen June 5th in Australia. Interesting thing here is, Daniel, is there's a rematch clause if Haney were to win. With that rematch, if there is a rematch, it's going to happen in Australia as well. Haney and his dad Bill talked a lot about they took less money, took the lower end of the pay scale for this. They could have made more money fighting defending the WBC belt, but they took a lot less money to make this fight happen. Your reaction to the fight finally getting made and kind of the details of the negotiation and of the deal between Kambosos and Haney?
Well, on Twitter, whenever something like this happens, I kind of say, cue the LeBron meme. Cue the LeBron meme. It's about damn time. Because it's about time this situation with the WBC title gets resolved. And we all know what that is, unfortunately. Is that it all started when they named Lomachenko the franchise champion at lightweight. And magically, through the power of email, named Devin Haney the WBC champion. Granted, Mauricio did go back on his word somewhat recently, saying that Kambosos should be considered the undisputed champion. But that question would always remain resolved. And this is an opportunity for Haney to get prestige, to make a legacy, and to possibly get a probably good, decent fight against, if he moves up a little bit, because he is young, a young Teofimo Lopez at 140 pounds. Because you have to remember, part of this deal was him leaving Matchroom and signing with Bob in Top Rank. So, yeah, they had to take a lot less money, and yeah, they probably had to go a different route because Haney has been trying to be a self promoter and trying to get the most fights out of this. But at a certain point, when it comes to something like this, you do need an actual promoter to handle the situations for you. I mean, luckily in this case, it did get done. Now, the rematch clause situation, that is going to be interesting because that would mean Devin Haney can't leave Australia because Australia, I think right now, is still currently under their lockdown rules, which, if I remember correctly, means that he has to quarantine himself for 21 straight days before even going outside. So you have that happening, and then if you have the rematch, why even try to leave when you know you're going to have to do that again, especially considering, unfortunately, the news out of Philadelphia. So it's a good thing that it finally happened. This deal's finally closed. We're going to get finally an actual undisputed in this weight division. And then we'll see where Haney goes. Because even when I was Bob as a promoter, he has a little bit more of a clear path. And I think actually with Bob now, there is no excuse to not make the Loma fight afterwards, should he win and should he win the rematch against Kambosos.
Another fight that was announced during our time off, Jacob, is at bantamweight. Naoya Inoue and Nonito Donaire in November 2019 fought in the finals of the World Boxing Super Series tournament. Inoue won a decision fight of the year for 2019. He unified the WBA, IBF bantamweight titles. Donaire has bounced back strongly from that L, captured the WBC belt. He's looked sensational in his last two fights. His title-winning bout stoppage win over Obali. His first title defense, he won also in impressive fashion. They're set to fight a rematch June 7th, I believe is the date, in Japan. Their first fight, I mentioned fight of the year. Given the form that both men have displayed recently, this rematch has the potential to be just as good. I'm really looking forward to this one. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of exciting to see Donaire kind of have this. His career has been so interesting. You know, he's kind of had these like ups and downs, but the fact that he's been stayed so relevant for so long and has been able to kind of adjust and operate on such a high level, it's been really impressive. But you know, you have Inoue, who has, you know, he beat, you know, Donaire previously in a great fight. You know, so he has that kind of going into it, and you know, he's the younger, you know, I'm not gonna say hungrier lion, but he's the younger lion. You know, he has kind of time on his side. He doesn't have the wear and tear that Donaire has. But you know, Donaire is a very, you know, he's just, you know, he's definitely a Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer. But he's very crafty, and I think he, you know, he's gonna give Inoue all he can handle. And I mean, part of me kind of hopes that he wins, and maybe we get a trilogy, to add to one of the big trilogy or the list of great trilogies throughout the year. These guys can be like almost like the perfect partners. Um, but the smart money would be on Inoue. Even though the Donaire I think he did bust his eye socket in that fight. I believe in like the fourth round or something like that. So, I'm just glad that they're able to make this fight. I know that what's his name, the other guy, Casa, is it
Casemiro.
Casemiro? He fought Rigondeaux, and he was saying he was going to fight Inoue, and he was supposed to fight Donaire, but then that whole thing kind of fell apart, and his fight with Rigondeaux was completely I don't know, shameful. It was just a really shitty fight. But yeah, I mean, these guys wanted to get it on. I respect both of them tremendously. That they're champions, and they're not afraid to get in there and fight each other, even after the great fight that they had. They're there for legacy, and Donaire has the legacy already, and Inoue is building on his legacy. So it's nothing but great for boxing, in my opinion.
Interesting development here. I want both of your opinions on this, gentlemen. Um, Cuban Boxing Federation has reached an agreement with Golden Ring Promotions to allow Cuban fighters, including Olympic champions from the 2021 Olympics Games, to compete in the professional ranks. Now, for at least as long as our lifetimes, longer than our lifetimes, the country has Cuba has not allowed professional boxing to happen. Right. All the Cuban fighters that we've known, all the professional champions from Cuba that we've known, they've had to flee the country and seek asylum all over the world, and to fight professionally. Your thoughts on this decision, the timing of this decision? Cuba has finally allowing professional boxing. Let's go with you on this one first, Daniel.
It's a decision half a century in the making, finally, because unfortunately, one of the running tropes has been in recent years when it comes to Cuban fighters, even though I know we're going to talk about one in the preview, is they have great amateur careers, but should they defect and should they be able to make it out of Cuba, a good amount of them just can't adjust to a professional boxing game. Like, unfortunately, the clearest example is Guillermo Rigondeaux, who has pretty much fought in the same amateur style his whole career. No matter how you feel that it looks good, it hasn't. It's been, unfortunately, in many ways aesthetically displeasing. And unfortunately, like I said, it rubs off on a good amount of other Cuban fighters, even some fighters that have adjusted fairly well when you think about it, like Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz, unfortunately, adjusted pretty well, but because of this, he had to become a professional at a advanced age for an athlete. So he never really got his best chance of trying to be a champion in the heavyweight division, and he'll likely, unfortunately, never will at this stage. And this situation that the Cuban government had to have noticed. They've had to have seen what's been happening with all their fighters, and well, they could put out the propaganda and say, "See, this is what happens when you leave. When you leave the revolution, you leave it less of a disgrace than you do the other ones. We know what they can do, but at the end of the day, they know also as well that that is what people think when it comes to Cuban fighters when they go into the professional realms. And The only way that's going to change that is you're going to have to allow their fighters to be able to fight professionally in their prime, be able to adjust to the professional sport in their prime, and enough in this day and age where some events are happening in areas where you don't think they would have happened before. Maybe you probably start getting them some other professional fights in Cuba. Like, could you imagine, like, when we're going to talk about in a preview, and you're Nasukas. Could you imagine him and Terrence Crawford should he win in Havana, in Santiago?
U.S. authorities wouldn't allow it. I doubt it. But in the next 5 years, and you can chime in on this as well, Jacob, do you think we could see a world title fight in Cuba?
Mm, that's a tough one. I mean, I want to say that we're not in the days of, where everything was off limits in Cuba. We definitely made strides to kind of, I think since, the Castro death and whatnot, they've kind of loosened up on that. But I don't know. In 5 years, are we going to see a fight there? I would probably lean more towards no than yes.
What say you, Daniel?
I would probably say yes because it's looking to more and more that Cuba is going to slowly try to go the route of China when it comes to like their style of communism, which is basically a communist government with a capitalist economy. And they're already probably heading in that direction. And it's not a situation where they've been completely isolated. The only major country that's been embargoing them has been us. They have had tourist industries from other countries, from Europe in the past. And but this, like I said, this will be significant when it comes into having fighters, having the confidence to go to have like young Cuban heavyweights to be able to say like, you know what, I want to go train with Joe Diaz. I want to train with Joe Goose, and I want to train with Freddie Roach, and be able to do that without any risk of the government. So I do see it happening. It'll probably be tightly controlled, but I do somewhat agree. Even though I threw out that scenario, it probably may not be against an American.
Yeah, two international fighters, I could see it. I just don't see it with an American world champion anytime soon. I mean, for particularly Hispanic, Latin American, South American world champion, absolutely. Europe, depending on the country. U.S., nah, there's too many tensions right now between the U.S. and the Cuban government. Um, Not going to get into international matters in terms of why, but I just don't see that anytime soon. But the thing is, I'm glad that this country of Cuba is finally opening its doors for professional boxing. We know the story history of amateur boxing in Cuba. We know the story history of so many Cuban fighters um, having success in the pro ranks, and it would open the doors for Cuban fighters fighting now. They wouldn't have to go through that crazy route to send money to their families and whatever. It will help out Cuban fighters now who are fighting professionally and abroad. I figured this would be ecstatic news for fighters like a Ugas, fighters like a Yorkis Gamboa, who's fighting on that Spence uh, Spence Ugas undercard and other Cuban fighters abroad. This is only good news as far as I'm concerned. It's interesting to see where all of this will go, like I say, in the next 3, 5, 7 years, and on and on and on. Let's move over to some preview some fights here, and going to save the big fight for last. Let's start in the UK first. Fight is going to take place on the zone. This is going to talk about this card, the main event, and I'll go to back to you on this one, Daniel. Conor Ben, who's looked very impressive in his last few bouts. I like what I saw. Look, against Algeria. I know Algeria is old and not the fighter he once was, but for me, Ben has shown marked improvement over the past year and a half, 2 years, to the point where I think he would fit right in that landscape of Ennis, of Ortiz, of Rashidi Ellis in terms of up and coming welterweights, right? He fights Van Heerden here. Your thoughts on this fight? Your thoughts on Conor Ben?
Conor Ben is still an unfinished product, but obviously he probably is on a much better path than than unfortunately the Eubanks family, and when it comes to what his ceiling is at this stage. And we know Eddie did try to fork over some good money to Kell Brook to take this fight, but unfortunately it kind of looks like he's headed to a rematch with Amir Khan.
I hope not. I'm hearing more of a possible fight with Eubank Jr. this summer, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, but that does leave him. That does leave Ben with an opponent that we not well known, obviously, in this side of the shore. This is more of a European style of fight, and it's a fight that's meant to probably keep him still, particularly in the IBF, within those rankings. That keeps him in the hunt for the winner of, like I said, of the big fight that we're going to be talking about. So it is open there. It's just a business move. It is stay busy fight. They're probably gonna try to get somebody in the U.S. or probably have Connor have a U.S. debut next. But this is probably to keep him busy, have him keep the momentum going, probably get a good knockout, and try to push for a much tougher opponent when he comes to this side of the Atlantic.
Going to get everyone into this discussion here about this last fight. Main. Well, no, I'm going to you, Jacob, to talk about this undercard bout. I skipped the fight. My apologies. On the undercard of Ben Van Heerden, it was announced yesterday that we talked about Alicia Baumgartner a little bit. We mentioned Alicia Baumgartner in our discussion about Mikaela Mayer. It was announced yesterday that Bumgarner is going to make her first defense of that WBC 130-pound title against an Argentinian fighter by the name of Matisse. Don't know much about her, but from what I was able to look up, 41, smaller, more of a natural featherweight, junior featherweight. Haven't seen much of her in the ring, but from a little bit of footage, it's just seemed like she's a little bit too old and too small for the likes of Baumgartner, who showed herself to be a major puncher in that win against Terry Harper. Based on first observation, Baumgartner's going to be too much here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed. I don't, again, just like you, I don't know much about her opponent, Matisse, but in looking at what I'm kind of perplexed at is how does this fighter get a shot at the belts by having a 3-4 record in your last 7 fights? And she's only a couple fights removed from a loss. She lost 3 in a row from 2016 to 2017. I feel like this is just a kind of a wasted fight, in a sense that why didn't we get the Mayor Bumgarner fight, or you know, Bumgarner Troy or whatever? I mean, I think there could have been a better opponent, but maybe it's just kind of a gimme fight. She just won the belt, showcase fight. Give her an easy one before, we go on to the next one. But yeah, I don't think she's gonna have much trouble with her. Even with the natural size, I think Bumgarner does obviously have a pretty powerful punch, and so I think that will be the difference in the fight. Yeah, just kind of I don't know. It's kind of weird that somebody with this, but I guess this is kind of what we talk about with women's boxing, is that there's such a huge gap between the top people and the bottom. There's not a lot of middle, and so they need opponents. They need to get some rounds in, and they can't just always be fighting world beater after world beater, because there's just not that the depth isn't there. So it is what it is.
On the surface observation, it seems like this is a showcase bout for Baumgartner and easy work. And as I mentioned before, there seems to be a plan in place for her to fight, for Baumgartner to fight Choi. And that's what it seems that this fight is setting up to be, a, a tune-up bout for a unification bout with a WBA champion Hong Min Choi later on this year. Going to get both of your guys' thoughts on this upcoming fight. This last fight we're going to talk about was the big fight this weekend, the return of Errol Spence, coming back from a detached retina, fighting your Dennis Ugas. And I'll go back to you on this one, Jacob. They're going to fight this weekend in Texas. And I know a lot of people will consider Spence the favorite, and I do as well. They're going to fight in Arlington on Showtime pay-per-view. But the more I think about this fight, the more I think that your Dennis Ugas is going to give Spence a heck of a battle. Very defensively sound. He's shown more from the offensive perspective in his last few bouts, particularly in the fight against Manny Pacquiao. Um, I just think that Spence is going to find this guy hard to hit. He may win, sure, but I would not be one bit surprised if Ugas was to get the victory here. Your thoughts?
Ah, I mean, again, smart money on Spence, right? But I agree with you. I think Ugas is very slept on. I think he gave Porter, arguably he won that fight, but he didn't get the victory. But clawed his way back up. Beat Pacquiao soundly. Even though it's not the Pacquiao of old, and I mean we can all agree there. But yeah, he has a style that I think could potentially give Spence some problems. Um, Spence had some difficulty with Porter. That was a very close fight, and he's motivated. I think he wants to provide the upset, but I do think it's going to be kind of hard doing it in Texas. I mean, we've talked about judging in boxing. It's not the greatest. It's a very archaic and often wrong system. So he, so for him to win the fight, he would have to basically hurt Spence and possibly get him out of there, because I don't think he's going to win a decision. Even if he did technically win it, in the eyes of most people, I just don't think they're going to give him a decision in that backyard. But it's a definitely a great fight. It's a two top tier guys with belts, unification. So definitely wouldn't sleep on Ugas. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled out a victory, but I'm still probably going to go Spence.
Do you agree, Daniel, with our assessment that Spence is the favorite technically, but Ugas is going to give this guy a really tough bout. For me, again, the defense, he's going to be sound. And in order for Spence to really, Spence can outbox him, but I think he's going to have to put some hurt on this guy. if he does it, could spell trouble. Could spell trouble.
Yeah, unfortunately, the betting, like I said, if you're a betting man, the smart money would be on Spence. But the problem for me is that I still have not seen if the Spence that we're gonna get is a Spence that has somewhat even 80% recovered from that car accident. That's what makes me worry a little bit more in that front because ultimately this is going to be a fight where defense is going to win out and you're going to have to hurt your opponent pretty badly to win. And everybody's expecting a knockout from Spence because that's what we've been expecting all along when it comes to Spence in this fight because we all want one fight when it comes to Errol Spence. It's with Bud. But Ugas, in that win with Pacquiao, even though, like I said, I do agree with Jacob. Yeah, it is not prime Manny Pacquiao. But it still, unfortunately, went against the champion, and he ultimately wound up, for the time being, barring any political calamity, wound up retiring an all-time great. That's a huge confidence booster for Ugas, who can go into this fight saying, I'm used to being the underdog, but look at what I did the last time I was considered the underdog. So this is pretty much right now I have to look at realistically a more even fight. I edge it more towards Spence. I'm just hoping to see more of the pre car accident Spence in this fight into it because, like I said, we all want him. A lot of people want him to win, and we all know exactly why we want him to win. So let's hopefully get that result.
I mean, let's put it out there. Spence Crawford is the fight that everybody wants to see at 147 pounds, but the issue is what version of Errol Spence will we see on the night of the fight? If it was the Spence that we saw, let's just say pre the fight that we saw, the Spence that we saw against Mikey Garcia, that's one thing. But he's had two significant incidents: the car accident, post the fight with Mikey Garcia. He returned with defeat Danny Garcia, setting up for a fight against Pacquiao. He suffered a detached retina, and we just don't know fully 100% what we're going to get from him. So that's really the looming $64,000 question out there. What Errol Spence are we going to see? Are we going to see the Spence that was so ballyhooed and thought to be the best in the division, or are we going to see damaged goods? That's the issue heading into this fight. And I think we're going to start to shut things down on that note. There are other fights on that card. Staniosis, he's fighting Butaviev for a quote unquote belt at 147 pounds. Yorkis Gamboa is fighting on that card. Brandon Lee, we may talk about that next week, but I think we're going to shut things down on that note. Gail had to leave early, unfortunately. If you want to talk, you can check out her writings over on nyfights.com. Also on Communities Digital News.com, COMMDIGI News.com. If you want to check her, if you want to talk boxing with her, if you want to talk media with her, or if you want to check out occasionally her appearances on TMZ Live, you can follow her on Twitter, PR Pro San Diego. I'll go to you, Jacob. Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies, let the folks know where they can check you out.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Mike. And yeah, you can check me out at Twitter, JRATM23.
And last but certainly not least, Daniel from the Squadron 4 Boxing News. Congratulations on your Miami Heat #1 seed in the East. for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling. I'm sure you probably got Raw on the DVR. For those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
You can hear me, folks, on Twitter, Rawkus99, RAWKUZ99. Thank you.
If you want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter. Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to check out all things regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the site blog is the place to go to, p4pboxreport.com. If you want to email us, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxreport.com. On the site, you can check out where to find us all over the socials, YouTube, Facebook, Meta, Twitter, IG, Tumblr. You can also check out where to find the podcast on all various platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else in between. You can check out where you can links to where you can donate, Cash Me, PayPal donation links, and also check out the stuff on Beachbody on Demand. Also, if you check us out on Apple iTunes, I would love to hear some comments from you. Love to please write a review if you can have the time. Make sure to follow us on Apple iTunes. Make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you like what you heard, hit that like button. 5-star review from Apple Podcasts will get read on the show. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Spence Ugas. We will talk about more fights on that card. We will do a recap of Conor Benn, his fight against Randy Iridan, Alicia Baumgartner's fight against Matisse, and we will do preview of fights that's taking place on the weekend in and around of the 23rd. John Rael Casimiro, who Jacob mentioned in the discussion about the rematch between Inoue and Donaire. Casimiro's returning to the ring to defend his WBO bantamweight title against mandatory challenger Paul Butler. That's taking place on the 22nd. On the 23rd, of course, finally, the fight between Tyson Fury and Dillian White that will take place. So we will talk about those fights to be specific, as well as any and all boxing matches that may happen in the interim. Again, for Gail, who joined us, who had to leave early, unfortunately, for Gail from Communities Digital News and nyfights.com, for Jacob from Japan Boxing, for Daniel the Inscriber. Really hope you enjoyed what you was listening to this evening. This has been episode 358 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. See you guys next time. Have a good evening. Good night. Yeah, have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, folks.
And RIP, rest in power, Dwayne Haskins on his unfortunate, much too early passing that took place this weekend. Episode 358 of Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time.